is an industry of considerable importance, both social and economic. Worldwide, over the years, silk production has registered a steady rise, and competition in international silk trade is getting stiffer, with more and more countries joining the ranks as silk producers. Quality consciousness amongst buyers is naturally high, and consequently, only the best quality raw silk fetches the price that makes the multidisciplinary enterprise of sericulture a truly profitable one. Today, India is the second largest raw silk producer in the world. But productivity per hectare, when compared to other leading raw silk producing countries, is low. To ensure a larger share in the world market, steps need to be taken to increase both productivity and quality of raw silk. It is in this light, and given this urgent need for quality improvement and profitable productivity, that Bivoltine sericulture assumes its significance. Bivoltine, quite simply, is a special race of silkworms that produce a greater quantity and superior quality of silk yarn. When compared to the multivoltine or multi-bi breeds reared popularly in India, Bivoltine yield more and better cocoons per unit area of mulberry, and more and better silk per unit of cocoons reeled. This is a Bivoltine cocoon market in Hassan district of Karnataka state. For the farmers gathered here, today is a day of reckoning, a day when their unstinting labor of the past few weeks will yield concrete results. Venkatarao, a farmer from Hassan district in Karnataka, is a particularly happy man. Uniform in size, these cocoons are well built and stiff, free of oozy infestation and dead pupae. White in color, the cocoon weight is around 2 grams each, as against the multi-bi cocoon that weighs only 1.5 grams.
For good quality Bivoltine cocoons such as these, the farmer can expect very good returns. As a reeler, I would give the best price simply because I get more silk from them. The cocoons are stiff and uniform in size. They have less floss and high shell percentage, indicating more raw silk per cocoon. Cooking to reeling waste is minimal, as is the rendita. This makes reeling both easy and profitable.
Yes, Bivoltine cocoons mean increased profitability. Venkatrao's care and efforts have finally been rewarded, and Bivoltine has assured him the profits sericulture truly deserves. Successful Bivoltine rearing requires systematic care at every stage, from cultivation of mulberry to cocoon harvest. One of the most important factors determining the success of Bivoltine is rearing climate. Bivoltine is best reared in the cooler months when temperature is within 30 degrees centigrade and relative humidity is not very high. Even in areas where temperature is around 34 degrees centigrade, Bivoltine rearing is possible, since temperature up to 5 degrees centigrade can be manipulated through appropriate design of the rearing house itself. In the plains of South India, Bivoltine is ideally suited to the climate prevailing between the months of August and February. In hilly regions like the Western Ghats, where rains are heavy, Bivoltine rearing is possible through the year, except in the peak monsoon season. In hilly areas with moderate rainfall, Bivoltine rearing is possible through the year, the only limitation being leaf availability due to winter dormancy. A good mulberry plantation is also an important prerequisite for success in Bivoltine rearing. Good quality leaves of high nutritive value are essential for Bivoltine silkworms. Improved mulberry varieties such as Kanva 2, S30, S36 and S54 are ideally suited. Land location is also important. Low-lying and marshy areas should be avoided. Though mulberry can be cultivated under both rain-fed and irrigated conditions, yields are better qualitatively and quantitatively under irrigated conditions that ensure a high moisture content in mulberry leaves. As mulberry is a deep-rooted plant, soil quality and composition is important too. Mulberry is best grown in slightly acidic soil that is clayey loam to loamy in texture, porous and fertile with good water holding capacity. If soil tests reveal high acidity, lime needs to be applied as a soil corrective measure. It can be spread evenly on the field and then mixed in by ploughing. It may also be deposited in trenches between rows of mulberry. If the soil is too alkaline, application of gypsum or sulfur is required. Ideally, the land should be flat. In slopey areas, it is necessary to terrace the land. Land preparation and initial care during planting is of utmost importance too, as mulberry is a perennial crop that starts yielding just after 6 months of plantation and lasts for over 15 years without significant drop in leaf yield. Land should be prepared by deep ploughing up to a depth of 12 to 15 inches during the pre-monsoon showers. Weeds, stones and gravel must be removed and the soil brought to a fine tilth and level by repeated ploughing. Care should be taken to leave the surface soil intact. At this stage, a basal dose of farmyard manure should be applied at the rate of 20 tons per hectare. This helps to keep soil loose and fertile. Besides, farmyard manure contains all the micronutrients and trace elements essential for healthy, luxuriant plant growth. When the land is ready for planting, cuttings should be prepared from the middle portion of the stem of a well-grown plant of the desired variety. They should be at least 22 to 23 centimeters in length, with 4 to 5 buds. The ends should be cut clean with a sharp knife. The cutting may be planted directly in the prepared field. For best and quick establishment, however, 5 to 6 month old saplings raised in a nursery should be transplanted onto the main field. Even when direct planting is resorted to, a reserve stock of cuttings must be planted in a small separate nursery. These saplings can subsequently be used to fill up likely gaps in the main plot. A factor that contributes significantly to both leaf yield and quality is density of plant population. Widely spaced plants receive ample sunshine. This is essential to luxuriant leaf growth, high yields and leaf quality. In the plains, maintain a distance of 60 centimeters by 60 centimeters between plants and rows. In high rainfall and hilly areas, a space of 90 centimeters between plants and 90 centimeters between rows is ideal and ensures optimum growth. A month after planting, failed pits, if any, can be easily located. These should be promptly filled with a reserve stock of saplings from the nursery. Between 45 and 60 days after planting, weeding must be carried out, as weeds compete for nutrients and water with the growing mulberry plant. Hoeing and weeding also serve to loosen the soil. At this stage, weeding must be done manually. Irrigation is another important factor determining leaf yield and quality. Furrows for irrigation should be at least 15 centimeters deep and 30 centimeters wide for adequate water holding capacity and effective percolation to root zone. Mulberry requires to be irrigated once in 10 or 15 days. The frequency depends on the type of soil. When tender leaves are required for young age rearing, irrigation frequency must be increased to once in 5 days. Adequate and balanced fertilization is also essential to ensure high yields and leaf quality. In addition to farmyard manure, chemical fertilizers must also be used. Balance between the three elements, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, is particularly important as all three play a vital role in leaf production and quality. Nitrogen promotes leaf yield, phosphorus contributes to leaf quality, and potassium enhances both quality and resistance. For optimum results, the mulberry plant must be given 300 kilograms of nitrogen, 120 kilograms of phosphorus, and 120 kilograms of potassium per hectare per annum. This is best supplied in 5 split doses after each leaf harvest. In flat lands, the fertilizer can be spread between the plants and mixed into the soil. On slopes, it is better to deposit it in furrows and cover with soil. Both chemical and organic fertilizers are essential as together they boost leaf yield and quality substantially. Once the crop is established, measures like pruning need to be taken up periodically to ensure luxuriant leaf growth. The plant may be pruned at a height of 10 to 15 centimeters from ground level once a year. After 2 leaf harvests, it can be middle pruned at a height of 45 to 60 centimeters. The whole shoot can also be pruned to ground level at a height of 10 to 15 centimeters, making pruning and harvesting of leaf a combined operation. At all levels, pruning must be done carefully with a sharp sickle or knife to avoid damage to stem or peeling of bark. During growth, various diseases or pests may imperil plant health. Leaf spot, powdery mildew, and leaf rust are the major fungal diseases of mulberry. Root knot is caused by nematode. These diseases can affect growth and cause loss of leaf yield and quality. They should be prevented effectively at the right time. Scores of insects are known to be pests of mulberry, causing considerable damage. These must be immediately removed physically or destroyed by spraying insecticides. Whenever chemicals are used to control diseases and pests, it should be as per the advice and recommendation of a specialist. It is also important to ensure that the effect of the chemicals used has worn off and mulberry leaves are fit and safe to be given to the silkworms. And then, finally, the reaping of benefits. For better feed value, harvesting of leaves is best done during the cooler hours, in the morning or evening. To enable maximum moisture retention and freshness, leaves must be collected in wet gunny bags or baskets lined with wet gunny cloth. They should be loosely packed and covered by wet gunny too. The storage chambers must also be kept cool and moist by a wet gunny cloth lining. The harvested leaves should be heaped loosely and covered with wet gunny cloth to prevent quick drying and loss of nutritive value. The leaves should be periodically turned gently to provide adequate aeration. If necessary, the gunny cloth lining and covering should be sprayed with water. Use of a wet sand bed or a humidifier in the leaf storage room can improve efficiency. Under these conditions, mulberry leaves can be stored for more than a day, though the need may be around 12 hours. Thus, a number of factors contribute to good establishment of mulberry garden, higher yield, and better leaf quality. A good mulberry garden is the best insurance and guarantee to a successful Bivoltine crop. Sericulture is a multidisciplinary enterprise that requires simultaneous planning of various activities. Prior to leaf harvest and procurement of silkworm larvae or seed from the grainage, it is essential to ensure that all necessary arrangements have been made for rearing. A separate silkworm rearing house with distinct areas for leaf storage and young and late age rearing is desirable. The size would depend on the quantity of layings to be reared. Ideally, the room should be rectangular. The long side should face the north-south direction to avoid direct sunlight and heat radiation. Adequate windows help cross-ventilation. Air inlets in the lower half of the wall let in fresh, cool air from the outside. Ventilators in the upper half of the wall exhaust warm, foul air from the inside and facilitate free aeration. The roof should be of a poor conducting material. A thatched roof or a country tile roof is ideal. A high roof is better than a low one, and a false ceiling is desirable to protect the room from radiating heat and cold. The floor should be cemented and raised to a height of 1.5 to 2 feet from ground level. Walls should be thick. A veranda running around the room helps insulation and protects the room from sudden temperature fluctuations. Shade trees also help to keep the rearing room cool. All openings should be provided with a fly-proof mesh. The rearing room should be amply furnished with the required equipment before rearing starts. Equipment required depends on rearing volume and silkworm age. After gathering all the equipment and before start of rearing, one important step still needs consideration: disinfection. Effective disinfection is of prime importance for healthy, disease-free growth of silkworms. Before start of disinfection, ensure that the rearing room is made airtight by closing doors, windows and ventilators. Gaps must be sealed with paper tape. All appliances must be then cleaned and washed in 5% bleaching powder solution. This is made by adding 50 grams of bleaching powder to 1 liter of water. Use a high-grade bleaching powder with a 30% chlorine content. This destroys all pathogen. Next, the rearing room itself must also be cleaned with 5% bleaching powder solution. The quantity required is 2.5 liters per 2.5 square meters of surface area. For regular swapping of rearing room floor, use a 2% bleaching powder solution. The room and all equipment must also be disinfected with 2% formalin solution. This is prepared by mixing 1 part of commercial formalin to 17 parts of water. Ensure that the formalin used is of a good quality with 36% formaldehyde. Addition of lime powder to formalin solution enhances the efficiency of disinfection. This is prepared by adding 5 grams of lime to 1 liter of 2% formalin solution. Mix thoroughly and sieve through linen. The prepared solution should be used immediately as it loses its effect in 24 hours. Disinfection should also cover the outside and areas surrounding the rearing room. After disinfection, keep the rearing room sealed for at least 1 day. To avoid contamination, open it just 1 or 2 days prior to the silkworm seed or larvae procurement. Since young age silkworms are delicate and susceptible to harm, it is advisable to procure young age worms for rearing from reputed chalky rearing centers. These are extensively equipped with all facilities to ensure optimum silkworm growth. Though comparatively expensive, the worms are well grown and free of disease. This goes a long way in ensuring success in bivoltine rearing. If even young age rearing is to be undertaken in the rearing room itself, remember that good quality silkworm seed is of prime importance for rearing success. Layings should be rich and free of disease. Procure them from a reputed, fully equipped granage, since only they can prepare such seed. During transportation, remember that the eggs are alive and developing. Transport the eggs from granage to rearing room during the cooler hours. Carry them in cotton bags lined with wet pads or tender leaves that help maintain humidity. Packing eggs in polythene or closed suitcases is harmful. Prior to incubation, silkworm eggs should be washed in 2% formalin solution for 15 minutes and dried in shade. Temperature, humidity, and light conditions at incubation affect hatchability and worm vitality. Ideal conditions can be arranged in the rearing room itself. In regions or during seasons of high temperature and low humidity, use of an earthen pot or polythene chamber placed on a wet sand bed is recommended. Egg sheets must be spread in a single layer on incubation trays lined with paraffin paper. Wet sponge pads should be placed all around. A paraffin paper covering helps maintain the required humidity. Practices such as bundling all eggs in one tray, hanging egg sheets from roof or stand, or rolling egg sheets and keeping them behind photo frames, all these are harmful and should not be followed. When eggs are at pinhead stage, roughly 2 days prior to hatching, they should be kept in the dark. This process is known as black boxing. 2 days after black boxing, on the expected day of hatching, eggs should be exposed to diffused light. This should be done at around 7 a.m. In the next 2 to 3 hours, hatching will be completed. The newly hatched larvae must be first disinfected with bed disinfectant like 1% diethane M45 mixture with kaolin or formalin chaff. Next, they should be fed as soon as possible. Starvation at this stage weakens larvae. The first feeding also helps in separating the newly hatched larvae from their eggshells and aids their transfer from egg sheets to rearing tray. This process is called brushing. Brushing should be taken up promptly and completed within an hour of hatching, that is by 10 a.m. For brushing, select tender mulberry leaves, cut into 1 centimeter squares. To avoid quick drying, collect them in a basin lined with a wet cloth. Sprinkle the leaves over the egg sheets. The newly hatched larvae crawl up for feeding. After 10 to 15 minutes, invert the egg sheets with the leaves and the worms onto the paraffin paper, placed in chalky rearing trays. Next, brush the larvae gently with a feather and spread them out to make a bed. Place wet foam pads all around and cover with paraffin paper. The prepared chalky trays can be piled over one another on a stand or placed individually in rearing stands. The silkworm larval stage lasts for a period of 25 to 28 days, falling into 5 instars, each separated by a molt. The first instar is 3 to 4 days long, the second 2 to 3 days, the third 3 to 4 days, the fourth 5 to 6 days, and the fifth 7 to 8 days. feed, temperature, humidity, air and light requirements vary in each instar. When optimum growth for each instar has been attained, the worms stop feeding and wriggle out of their old skins. This sensitive period is known as molt. Each molt lasts approximately 20 to 24 hours. For purposes of rearing, silkworm growth can be divided into two main stages: young age rearing of silkworms of the first 3 instars and late age rearing of the last 2. During young age rearing, larvae are delicate and need great care and attention. Their growth is rapid and they must be fed sufficiently with good quality leaves. The first instar larvae particularly need succulent, soft, tender and protein-rich leaves. The first few leaves after the large glossy leaf of the mulberry shoot are ideal. The second and the third instars too have their own requirements which must be met. It is important to remember that harvested leaves should be stored well to prevent loss of water and nutrients. Prior to feeding, leaves must be chopped. Size varies from instar to instar. Feeding quantum also differs. 100 layings of silkworms would require roughly 3.5 kilograms of leaves during the first instar. In the second instar, roughly 10 kilograms are required, and in the third, the need increases to around 50 kilograms. 4 feeds a day at 6 a.m., 10 a.m., 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. are sufficient. Temperature and humidity requirements too vary from instar to instar. These must be strictly adhered to allow maximum development of young larvae. A paraffin paper covering over the rearing bed helps maintain the required high humidity and helps prevent withering of leaves. Half an hour before each feed, the paraffin paper cover should be removed. Spread the rearing bed to allow drying of previous feed. Give the next feed in one thin layer and replace the paraffin paper covering. The paraffin paper is required during the first and second instar rearing only. In the third instar, it is required only if temperature is too high and the atmosphere too dry. Leftover mulberry leaves and worm excreta must be periodically removed. If left in the bed, injurious gases could be generated through fermentation. To avoid this, rearing bed must be cleaned periodically. Cleaning is best done with nylon or cotton nets of an appropriate mesh size. Spread the net over the rearing tray before the first morning feed. When the feed is spread on it, the worms crawl up. An hour prior to the next feed, lift the net with the worms and feed and transfer into another rearing tray. The leftover refuse of litter and dried leaves must be collected in polythene bags or litter baskets and disposed of in litter pits far away from the rearing house and the mulberry garden. During the first instar, when worms are tiny and liable to get lost, the bed should be cleaned just once. During the second instar, the bed must be cleaned twice. From the third instar onwards, the bed must be cleaned every day. During the 12 to 13 days of young age rearing, silkworms grow rapidly and increase roughly 500-fold in weight and 300-fold in size. Accordingly, rearing bed space should be increased at every instar. From brushing to the end of the third instar, the rearing bed area needs to be increased by 20 to 22 times. In other words, for 100 DFLs or 40,000 larvae, the bed area requirement increases from 4 square feet at brushing to 90 square feet at the end of the third instar. From the end of the third instar to the final instar, the larvae grow both in weight and size by 25 times. During this period, feed, temperature, humidity, light and aeration requirements differ from that of the first 3 instars. Temperatures must be comparatively cooler and relative humidity lower. Therefore, the use of paraffin paper and wet sponge pads can be dispensed with. Good aeration is also important at this stage. Apart from keeping the insect body temperature low and cool, this also helps to drive away foul air from the rearing room. Late instar silkworms are voracious feeders. During young age rearing, they consume only 6% of the total feed. Consumption increases to 14% in the 4th instar and 80% in the 5th instar. The 4th and the early 5th instar silkworms require leaves of medium maturity. During the last 4 to 5 days of the 5th instar, coarser, thicker leaves can be given. When the leaves are not uniformly mature in a shoot, especially in the rainy season, clip the top to facilitate the same and get the coarse leaves required by the 5th instars. During late age rearing, entire leaf can be fed to the silkworms. However, when worms prepare for the 4th mold, feed cut leaves. Shoot feeding or shoot rearing is becoming very popular since it saves both time and labor. However, this method requires 50% more rearing space. It is ideal for large-scale farmers. When shoot feeding is followed, it is cut into a convenient size for feeding in a tray or in a rack. Late-age silkworms require 4 feeds a day. This can be judiciously increased to 5 in regions or during seasons of high temperature. In cooler, humid weather, or when shoots rather than individual leaves are being fed, feeds can be decreased to 3 per day. Adequate spacing should be provided to match the size of the larvae during the late age. For 100 layings of worms or 40,000 larvae, provide 240 square feet or 20 big trays during the 4th instar and double the space for the 5th. Since refuse and litter are more during late age rearing, beds should be cleaned every day. Use nylon or cotton nets and dispose all waste in litter pits carefully. Hygiene during rearing is as important as feeding, cleaning, spacing, and environment. Young age silkworms especially must be reared under total hygienic conditions, as early infection can cause total crop failure. To start with, surface disinfection of silkworm seed before start of rearing must be made a practice. The rearing house and all appliances must be protected by disinfection both before and during rearing. All material used repeatedly, feathers, nets, chopsticks, etc., should be disinfected after every use. Paraffin paper and newspaper should not be reused. The rearer too must ensure hygiene. Use separate slippers in the rearing room and restrict entry. Wipe your feet on the formalin wet mat. Wash your hands in formalin solution or Dettol. To avoid possible contamination, rear young and late-age silkworms in separate houses or separate rooms. Avoid hand cleaning of silkworm beds. Net cleaning is hygienic. Bed refuse and litter is a source of secondary contamination. It should be carefully collected in polythene bags or litter baskets. Take care not to spill it in the rearing premises and dispose of far away from the rearing room and the mulberry garden. Never use this waste directly as manure in gardens. Thoroughly compost it before use. Dead or deceased worms should be promptly identified and picked using forceps. Collect them in a lime vat and dispose by burning or burying in soil. Periodic disinfection of larval body is also a must. Dust newly hatched larvae with fungicide formulations. After each mold, application of Resham Keet Aushad on larval body is recommended. Formalin chaff application is also required as it kills most pathogen and also effectively checks contamination in the rearing bed. Silkworms are prone to a few diseases and pests. These must be combated effectively at the right time. The 4 major silkworm diseases are pebrine, flashery, muscadine, and grassery. Of these, pebrine is the most destructive. It is a silkworm disease known to be transmitted from generation to generation through eggs. Microscopic examination to screen disease-free seed, surface disinfection of eggs, disinfection of rearing space and appliances, screening of healthy worms during rearing, and strict maintenance of hygiene are the steps to be adopted to control this disease. Flashery, another disease, is caused by either bacteria or virus that multiply due to faulty rearing. Correct feeding, maintenance of hygiene, providing adequate rearing space and aeration are the best insurance against this disease. Grassery is another common disease that infects silkworm, especially in the late age. The infected worm swells and a white fluid starts oozing from the body. Worms become restless and start moving around in the tray. Infected worms must be promptly picked up and destroyed. The disease can be prevented by the application of a chemical mixture, Resham Keet Aushad, apply on the silkworm body as per schedule. This helps prevent both grassery and muscadine. Muscadine is a fungal disease that occurs during the monsoon and winter seasons when humidity is high and temperature low. The application of Resham Keet Aushad can help prevent the disease. So can thorough disinfection of egg with 2% formalin solution. Also, disinfect larvae with formalin chaff. Formalin chaff can be prepared by mixing ready formalin solution of the required strength with charred husk in a 1:10 proportion. The mixture should be used immediately after preparation. Apply over worms uniformly, just after bed cleaning when leaf is less and the worm body fully exposed. After application, cover the tray with paraffin paper or newspaper for half an hour to allow effective disinfection. Feed the worms later. The formalin solution strength used in preparation of formalin chaff depends on larval age. Amongst the pests of silkworm, the most serious is the oozy fly. Infestation can be easily noticed by the presence of the oozy eggs on larval body or by black marks on the body caused by the entry of hatched young maggots. The oozy maggots, when grown inside the pupal body, come out by piercing the silk shell, making the cocoon unfit for reeling. Oozy fly entry into the rearing room should be prevented with a wire mesh covering on all doors and windows. A fly-proof anti-room to trap oozy fly entry into the rearing room is also recommended. Rearing inside a nylon net enclosure is also common. Oozicide is an effective chemical formulation that kills all the oozy eggs on silkworm body. It should be sprayed on larvae once in the 3rd instar and every alternate day in the 4th and the 5th instars. Thus, success in silkworm rearing depends on a variety of factors. Suitable rearing climate, a good mulberry plantation, adequate rearing infrastructure, systematic disinfection, quality silkworm seed or chalky worms, scientific young age rearing, methodical late age rearing, hygiene, and effective control of diseases and pests. Systematically reared silkworm will stop feeding towards the end of the 5th instar. This signals their maturity and readiness for spinning. Mature worms can be easily distinguished by their translucent appearance. The body also shrinks slightly. In search of anchorage to commence cocoon spinning, the worms tend to move towards the top of the leaf layer or to the periphery of the rearing tray. When this is noticed, pick the ripe worms and put them on mountages. Mounting must be timed accurately. If delayed, worms start spinning in the rearing tray itself, causing considerable loss of silk. If mounting is taken up before worms are ripe, they tend to move and fall from mountage. They may also defecate, staining and spoiling not just their cocoon, but the neighboring ones as well. Therefore, ripe worms must be skillfully identified. To avoid loss of silk, mount on a chandrike within 8 hours. Mounting density is of prime importance. Avoid overcrowding, as it can lead to double or deformed cocoon formation. Excessive urination and littering can also soil cocoons. A 4 feet by 6 feet bamboo chandrike can accommodate 800 worms. Collapsible plastic mountages can also be used. Once mounted, spinning progresses rapidly. Bivoltine worms take 3 days to spin their cocoons. During this time, they must be left undisturbed. Even a temporary pause caused by disturbance can lead to a break in silk filament. Temperature and humidity requirements at spinning are 25 degrees centigrade and below 70% respectively. On the 4th or the 5th day of spinning, the larva inside the cocoon turns into a pupa. Harvesting should be done on the 5th day, when pupa is hard and shell stiff. This timing is important. An early harvest can damage immature pupa and cause stains inside the shell. This affects reeling and raw silk quality. A delay in harvest reduces transportation time. Cocoon weight also falls, resulting in a monetary loss to the farmer. Handpick ripe cocoons, combining harvesting with sorting. Select only the good cocoons for marketing. Double, defective, soiled, pressed and perforated cocoons should be collected and marketed separately. After harvesting, fill cocoons loosely in gunny bags of a wide mesh size. This allows adequate aeration and prevents damage. Never pack cocoons tightly in polythene bags. In the morning, during the cooler hours of the 6th day itself, transport the cocoons for marketing. A good cocoon lot always catches the eye of the reeler and fetches a good price. Yes, Bivoltine ensures good returns for the farmer and high profits for the reeler.